Hello, welcome to the Daily Faded. My sound does not seem to be working here at all. Catherine, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can
You
you
can hear me,
me?
but I can't hear you. I don't know how I'm going to do this without being able to hear you. This is very, very suspect. Anyway, welcome to the Daily Faded, guys. This is my first guest who I've been looking forward to, Catherine Brobeck, and we're having an issue here because I can't hear her sound. So hold on one second, see if we can get this.
It says that you need to unmute me.
I'm sure it's just going to say, I can't hear my guest. Do you have the correct mic setting on your cam mic settings, Catherine?
I
You
do.
Let
me check again. Audio.
We're talking again now.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. Maybe I'll do it without my... Okay, now we're getting started here, guys. Welcome to the Daily Faded. I'm the Hetz. This is where we get faded daily and talk about news and politics. And this is my guest, Catherine Brobeck, who is one of the most intelligent people that I know, so I had to have her on the show.
That's very nice of you to say. I apologize for the dim lighting. Apparently, we're having an apocalypse here in Los Angeles, and also my apartment's a little bit dark, so...
Well, you know, this is a very low-tech show, so the darkness is completely fine. How are you handling the apocalypse? Because it was mad crazy today.
Oh my gosh. My mom, I sent a picture to my mother, and she said that the sky looked apricot colored.
I was thinking more mustard out here in the valley today. It was looking very mustard.
Probably worse in the valley. It was pretty bad here. The light in this apartment has been so dim. I've had lights on all day. It's been just insane.
Well, and you also, we'll get into politics and news stuff in a second here, but you've also been living on your own for this entire pandemic in your apartment. Have you begun to go like, oh God, what's that movie where the woman's going crazy in the apartment? The now it's escaping me. It'll come to me at just the wrong moment. But are you going a little crazy in your apartment?
Repulsion.
Repulsion. Yes, that's what I was trying to think of. Repulsion.
See, I know you.
Yeah. You know what I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit also like it was like an Ingmar Bergman movie, like it was like an isolated island in Sweden that we were just stranded on, and I just like had imagined some people possibly.
That's funny. All right, well, let's see. As we do every night, I just want to do an update on the coronavirus situation. The world is over 28 million cases of coronavirus as of today, with over 912,000 deaths. In the U.S., we're at a little over 6.5 million cases, 34,413 new cases today. Catherine, I don't know how much you've been paying attention to the case numbers, but we've kind of plateaued in this sort of 25 to 40 range lately, and it doesn't seem to be going down much below that. And we're at 196,111 deaths with 873 today. That's according to ncov2019.live. And so that number, 873 deaths, is a little bit better than the 1,000 deaths a day that we were averaging. But
yeah,
still not much of an improvement.
No, and I mean, I think that one of the things that you have to consider is that our testing rate has gone down. So if the number of confirmed cases have continued to be at a plateau or similar to what they were before, and we're not testing at the same rate, that presumably means that there are probably more cases than
are for sure
reported.
For sure.
And also on top of that, you have to realize that in Europe, countries that had seen a plateau or a decline have now gone back up again. France in particular and Spain had seen massive declines, and now they've gone back up again in the last week or two. And it's because they opened back up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, that's the thing, is when you open back up, the cases go up, and then a couple weeks after that, the deaths go up. Um,
Right.
it's that contagious, and it's that omnipresent. It's everywhere. So,
Well, and I don't know if you saw the LA Times today, which, I've been joking about this. It's not a joke at all. It's horrifying. But I've been joking about it since like February, that I was like, do we actually think that the first cases were in January? And so the LA
right.
Times today reported a report from UCLA that was going back through their records through December, and they'd seen a steep incline in respiratory ailments and hospitalizations in December before China had ever admitted to anything.
I have no doubt that the disease was here in December. I mean, some of the studies they did looking at when the earliest deaths happened, excuse me, occupational hazard of smoking while doing a live stream is and they were tracing the first cases back to late December.
Right.
Because
So,
they said the first death was the first weekend of February. And
right.
then if you go back 2 weeks from that, and somehow they bounced it all the way back to the last week of December. So I have no doubt. That the disease was here in December.
I said this to a friend of mine who's an editor way back in March, that I was upset at some of their reporting about the numbers, because I was like, that the numbers aren't accurate, right? You're aware. And she was kind of asking me about it. And at my old job, I was dealing with maternal and infant mortality rates. And so I had dealt with the CDC, et cetera. And I know from those numbers, from when I was working in that those numbers are
right,
remotely accurate.
And
so you had to look at it and be like, well, the reporting, you have to assume several things, right? You have to assume that testing is being done reliably, which it clearly isn't. And you have to assume that hospital reporting to public health departments is being done accurately, which it probably isn't. Then you have to assume that those numbers are being reported to appropriate authorities, and that those are being reported to news media, and it's clearly not. So I don't think the numbers are anywhere near accurate.
Well, also, when you take the excess death rate and you overlay it onto the COVID death rate, you see that there are a whole bunch more respiratory deaths that are, that have an unclear cause of death, that are probably all COVID, that were not reported COVID.
Well, not only that, but then you see all these other things that are cardiovascular, right? Because one of the side effects of COVID has been cardiovascular. So
well, it's as much a vascular disease as it is a respiratory disease.
Right. So you're getting people with side effects that have, there was that, I think it was Notre Dame, or it was one of the big football schools. Maybe it wasn't Notre Dame. Maybe I'm making that up. But it was one of them that had.
It was Florida State.
No, it wasn't. No, it was 100% either like Notre Dame or someplace in Ohio, etc. And they were saying that when they were investigating, or was Penn State possibly, they were saying that when they were looking at their athletes who'd had COVID, these were athletes. These were people who were fit and teenagers. And they were having, like myocardial infections, etc.
I saw that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And that's the thing that's so crazy about how cavalier Trump and the right are about the coronavirus. It has serious lasting effects for a lot of people, and so, okay, maybe you think it's an acceptable death rate. I don't. But forget the people who died. Put that aside for a second. The people who live have complications that could last a lifetime.
And if they're really young, I mean, it could last for 60 years. You're talking about increased mortality rates, a lower, age range of death.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's not even counting the people who were on ventilators, because one of the things that happens when people are in long-term care in hospitals is that there are long-term side effects for being on a ventilator. And one of those things is like PTSD, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're dealing with an entire group of people who either they lost a loved one, they were in the hospital on a ventilator, they have long-term side effects, and that is not counting the almost 200,000 people in the United States who are dead.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, and it's probably at least 250,000. It could be as high as 300,000 who are actually dead from COVID right now in the United States. We know it's an undercount based on the ancillary studies that have been done around the totals. So I've got some notes of some things to talk about here, but let's just talk about Bob Woodward and Donald Trump. So you told me that you had some rage in you earlier today, and rage also happens to be the title of Bob Woodward's book.
What? Like, who are these people who are sitting on this information? Like, I just literally, like, I understand that you want to sell a book. I understand that there's a financial gain. You were sitting on 18 tapes of this for 8 months?
Well, no, because some of the tapes were made in July. So he wasn't sitting on all of it for 8 months.
But I mean, the most damning ones were in February. So,
but let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay. To do with this question of should Bob Woodward have said something? Because of course you must be a Putin puppet, Catherine, because that's what you just made the same argument that Trump made, and Trump is a Putin puppet. So I guess you're a Putin puppet as well. But the way I see it is, if he had released the March 19th tape where Trump talks about how deadly the virus is, say he had released that in April and people juxtaposed it to Trump's actual comments, as everyone has done in the media, I don't think anything would have changed. I mean, maybe something would have changed. I don't know. Whereas, here the political timing couldn't be much better from a standpoint of, ending Trump.
Well, do you think it's going to have any effect? Because here's the thing: like, ultimately, I don't think it's going to have any effect.
I think it might.
I think the bigger issue is not the Woodward book or the reporting; it's the comments about. It's not the comments about COVID. It's the comments about the veterans.
Mm-hmm. You think that's bigger than the Bob Woodward stuff?
For sure, I do. Yeah,
that's interesting. Tell me why.
Because here's the thing: as a country, we don't appreciate women. We don't appreciate minorities. We apparently don't appreciate the sick and the dying. But we have a cult around the military. And, you can see that from our budget, right? Mm-hmm. That we have a cult around the military. And the fact that he would say that stuff that was in the Atlantic piece, and that it would be backed up by multiple sources, it would be backed up by the Washington Post, it would be backed up by the AP, it would be backed up by Fox News. It's damning. And it's not that we didn't know that. He insulted John McCain on tape.
Yeah, I mean, he called him a loser, right? On tape,
So, and he's in, the Khan family he insulted. Mm-hmm. It's not that this was new information, but the fact that the generals are now against him, that to me is a bigger deal by a long shot than the Bob Woodward stuff.
Interesting. They're kind of a big 1-2 punch anywhere you look at it. But I
Well,
definitely felt
everything's kind of coming out because I think that people are done.
yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. Look, I think the cumulative effect of these two back-to-back news cycles, first about suckers and losers, and then about Trump, lying to the American public and is revealed by Bob Woodward. I feel like the cumulative effect of these two things has got to be worth a couple of points. Biden was at 7.6, up by 7.6 last time I looked at Real Clear Politics. I'd be shocked if by Monday he isn't up 8.6 or 9. I just feel like, if he isn't, then it will prove once and for all that Trump's base is just unapproachable, too far gone. There's nothing you can do about them.
Well, that might be true, by the way.
Which is true of most of them. It's just a question of whether or not there are any on the margins. Like someone who genuinely isn't racist but hates Democrats and socialism and had to make a devil's bargain when he voted for Trump, he or she voted for Trump, but really genuinely not racist and kind of disturbed by a lot of things. And then they hear that and they go, okay, that's one step too far. Maybe I'm fantasizing. Maybe it's just a fantasy, but I can imagine those people existing.
I have been talking to people about who are these people who are undeclared voters.
Right.
And, I think I've probably said this to you. I've said it to other people, but it's like, I kind of think that they're narcissists who want attention. Because I don't really understand in what world you would be undecided about this.
Right.
I mean, like if you don't have enough evidence one way or the other at this point, I don't know what to tell you. I don't think that there's anything left to say. He says everything. He says the quiet parts out loud. So if you are okay with him and still want to vote for him, you're going to do that. And I think there are two questions that you have to ask. One is about the polling. Are people who are voting for Trump just not telling pollsters, which is a big fear?
Yeah, there's a possibility of that.
And secondly, like my parents retired to a community in Minnesota that is historically conservative. It's outside of the cities. And there are a lot of Trump people there. And there is also the reverse concern that are people afraid to say that they're not voting for Trump. So
I think that's more likely this time around. Did anyone do any real research on this hidden Trump vote? Like, was it statistically a real thing in 2016? Did it really exist? Because I've heard people talking about it then, and now they're talking about it now again, and I just am not convinced. I'm not convinced because the Trump people I know, well, I don't really know any particularly well, but the Trump people I have met and talked to are eager to say that they're in for Trump because they love Trump and they're all about Trump, and I think if you're surrounded by people like that, you might be quiet about the fact that you're going to vote for Biden, to your point.
It's possible. I mean, one of my best friends on earth voted for Trump in the last election, and I kind of thought that she had been sold on Biden a few months ago, and it seems not.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my. Well, that's rough.
It's rough.
That's rough. Well, I watched the Trump press conference today.
I have to say I did not.
Somebody asked him, why did you lie to the American people and why should we trust what you have to say now? He said, I didn't lie. What I said is we have to be calm. We can't be panicked. And he said if he thought that was a bad statement, he would have reported it, talking about Bob Woodward. And then he called the reporter and the question and NBC a disgrace. What do you think of this myth that Trump is trying to construct, that he wants to keep people calm? What? Like, how could anyone believe that Donald Trump wants people to stay calm?
This goes back to your previous question. Like, at what point, either you're gonna believe him, or most of us aren't.
Yeah.
Like the thing is, if you're gonna, this is my issue with this. Either you are sold on him and you're gonna believe whatever comes out of his mouth, or you hate him and think he's a lying con artist and aren't going to believe anything he says. I don't think there's a middle road.
Yeah. No, I think it's true. Then another reporter asked him, why did you not level with the American people? And he just pivoted and started talking trash about Europe. Everything that you just said about Europe and their case levels going up a few minutes ago when we were talking about that, Trump has been referencing, but he keeps talking about percentages, and he's like, Italy up 400%, but they're up 400% from 30 to 150 cases. It's not like they had 25,000 new cases yesterday. They're not, they are having an uptick, and it's because they reopened. But the way Trump makes it sound is like they're as bad as, I would say as bad as Brazil, but Brazil's not the worst in the world. So you can only say as bad as the United States.
Well, I think that the actual comparable country to us would be Canada, right?
Right.
And if you look at their case rates, it's not even in the same vicinity.
No, they're nowhere near each other.
No. And so that's really they're next door to us. So that is the comparable example. Even Mexico would be comparable because, again, next door to us. And it's not even remotely close. And again, our rates are clearly not accurate. So, I find the percentage thing is confusing. And this is where I went back in March to reporting headlines that were misleading, because I think that has been a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you have to do is when you're describing data, you have to do it in a clear way that makes logical sense. And one of the things that you can't do is just throw numbers out there willy-nilly, because, when I was in high school, I took a college stats class.
Mm-hmm.
And the professor used to just always love to say, statistics don't lie, people do.
Right.
That's true.
Right. And that says everything when you look at the number of people who have died of COVID in this country and compare it to other countries.
Yeah. You just can't.
Whereas Trump will hunt and fish for some stat that looks good, like the case mortality rate that he loves to talk about, and it's like, well, that's great that we have a low case mortality rate, but I don't really think that's how you judge the entire pandemic, when things like the number of infections and the number of deaths are much more important metrics to just about everybody.
Right.
Except for Donald Trump.
Well, except for him. And on top of that, and I think this is the bigger, well, it's not the bigger issue than people dying, but the other issue is, look at what's happened to the country. Look at what has happened economically, and look at what it's going to do to us going forward. Mm-hmm. Look at what it's doing to high school and college kids, you know, who can't go back to school. Look at what it's doing to little kids who can't go to kindergarten. Like, look at what the actual impact of the incompetence is. And it's not just the case rate and the death rate. It is people who are being evicted, people who are not going to school, people who are losing their livelihood, people who are never going to recover from this.
Yeah.
And you have to take that into account as part and parcel of the entire pandemic and the response to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to mention this later, but Bernie Sanders spoke on the floor of the Senate today, and he was introducing legislation to impose a 60% wealth tax or income tax, actually, on the 467 billionaires in the country, to tax their COVID profits, to tax 60% of their COVID profits, and to use that to pay for healthcare for every American for a year. And the most powerful part of his speech was when he read letters that people have sent to him. And it was, all stories, individual stories of people trying to make it through unemployment and eviction and job loss and all of the things that are going on. And it was very powerful, and it really felt like, shame on you fucking Republicans.
Well, I mean, okay, did you read the Washington Post story today about Kissimmee, Florida?
No.
So there's a long form piece that I'd suggest that you read, and anybody who's watching this read. And it's about did you see the Florida Project?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it was shot like basically on iPhone. It has Willem Dafoe in it. But there's this series of hotels that are outside of Disney World, basically, in Kissimmee. And now they're essentially, a lot of the owners have abandoned them, and they're essentially tenements and roach hotels, and the power's been shut off in them. And they are being inhabited by people who are, former felons who can't get an apartment elsewhere, people who have minimum wage jobs, because apparently in that area in Orlando, you have to have like a $25 an hour job to be able to qualify for.
Right.
So they're like motel people.
Wow.
Yeah, they're motel people. And so there's this entire series of motels on a stretch in Kissimmee. And so the article is following people and trying to follow the outsiders who are trying to help them. And, it's religious groups and various social justice pastors and those kind of people. And it was one of the most depressing things I've ever read, ever. And that's happening here. I mean, you know my politics, that I'm like kind of middle of the road Democrat, but at this point I'm like, you read that and you're just like, there is no world in which that should happen. There just isn't. Like, there's no world in which Jeff Bezos should be making massive profit off of a pandemic, and there are people who are living in squalor in these hotels because nobody is helping them.
Yeah, well, the cost to end homelessness in this country is $20 to $40 billion. So high end, $40 billion in a budget of how many trillions?
Yeah, you cut military spending a little bit, and like you would just pay for that immediately, right? I mean, it would not be that complicated. There's another complicated issue with homelessness, and it comes across in those motel pieces, which is that you also then have to invest in a healthcare infrastructure that supports mental health in particular, because you can't get a lot of those people into houses and get the support for them without those additional resources.
Yeah.
So, you have to look at it holistically about what you're going to do. The poor woman who was a pastor in the Washington Post article, she was just like, she'd raised like several $million, and she thought about buying one of the motels, but the cost of it would have just been, even if she could afford to buy it, the cost to renovate it so that it wasn't falling apart and the cost to then support the people was too much money. And there's no resources. And they talked in the article to Health and Human Services in that county, which is Orlando. And they were like, well, shrug, whatever.
No big deal.
Yeah, they're just like motel people.
Oh, God.
And it's like, they're children in these places. They're children in these places. There are elderly people. They talked to one guy who he'd lost his business. He was like 85 years old. He'd lost his business. And then his wife has died. And then his significant other had like 4 strokes and was basically just like in a bed in this roach motel. And I mean, it is a tragedy that should not have happened ever.
No, look, there was a piece on CNN maybe 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I don't know, but the reporter went with the sheriff while the sheriff was doing evictions and interviewed all of the people as they're being thrown out of their apartments.
Yeah.
And at one point they asked the sheriff, is it hard to do this, to evict all of these perfectly lovely seeming people, right? But is this hard to do? And he goes, well, I got 6 kids. And I'm like, you have 6 kids and you can bring yourself to throw families on the street? You have 6 kids? How do you treat your 6 kids? It's like that whole thing of like when the woman told George W. Bush that she had 3 jobs, and George W. Bush leaned over and he was like, isn't that great? Isn't that great? The American spirit works 3 jobs. Like it's some awesome thing. Like, no, I'm sure the woman would be much happier if she could afford to live on 1 job, Right.
I mean, my great-grandfather, one of them, was a Swedish farmer in Minnesota. And his wife died. They had 7 kids, and she died after the last one was born. And he lost his farm over a few dollars.
Wow.
And all those kids, they had to go work servants. They had to leave home. They had to take care of the other kids.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that was the thing that was nice about Bernie giving this speech on the Senate floor today, was someone was actually talking about the people who are suffering.
Right.
Someone's actually talking about the people who are suffering. And it's not just the politicians, it's the media too,
Oh, it is. And it's the media, and it's the media just like at some level not acknowledging, I think, what the real cost is to like actual human people.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Nobody is discussing the cost. Nobody.
I mean, and part of it No, and part of it, and if you want to talk about why Trump is still popular, it's because people look at what this like reporting is or look at what the sentiment is. And if you are like in West Virginia or if you're in rural Alabama or something and you're looking at this and you think, well, nobody cares about me, he's telling a lie that seems to resonate to people because they aren't being taken care of. Like, that is the reality. They're not being taken care of. And, you know, I might not be fully on like the sort of Bernie bandwagon, but, you know, my opinion is that we have
the way you say that.
We have a responsibility as human beings in a society to maintain the society. And what a society has to do is that you have to be cognizant of the needs of other people. Because if you're not, then the society is like a Jenga tower, right? You're pulling out the bottom of it, and like maybe you don't give a shit about the bottom of it at the moment. Maybe you're like, oh, that Taco Bell employee, who cares?
Right.
But that Taco Bell employee, first of all, is providing you Taco Bell, which is like great. But also is somebody who has to pay for a house, who has to pay for a family, who has to be a productive member of society, who is working. And if you don't respect that or appreciate the fact that that person, if they're getting paid $7 an hour and they're never going to be able to afford an apartment or anything else, you're pulling the bottom out of the Jenga tower and you're expecting that the rest of it's going to stand.
Right. Well, and also I think what you're talking about is that it's not a trickle down economy, it's a trickle up economy.
Of course it is.
You know,
of course,
so
there's a really interesting thing that was about the Hudson Yards project in New York, which is that monstrosity that they built.
Yes, I'm very well aware of, very familiar with it.
And about how, it was a New York Times article.
Is this when you were staying in the Trump Hotel in Manhattan?
Oh, thanks.
Oh,
Thanks.
I know you wouldn't do that.
I got on Priceline, and
I'm just kidding. You would never do that. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to out you on that.
By the way, it had a really nice soaking tub with a television in the bathroom, and
I'm sure it did.
It was kind of really broken down, in all honesty. Like the veneers on like the cabinets were all cracked because it's not been maintained. But the soaking tub was you know what my favorite thing about it is that it had a separate, so in the bathroom there was a soaking tub, there was a separate shower, and then there was a separate toilet. And in the toilet, there was a business phone.
Of course there was. Oh my God. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you saying right before that?
Oh, no, but the article was in the New York Times because of course it was. And it was basically saying, we have to save this development because nobody's going to it. And it's like, it was meant for rich tourists from Dubai. That's who it was built for. It was not built for anybody who lives in New York. It was not built for anybody who goes about their day. Right. Nobody's going there.
Right.
So, like, you built this entire massive billions of dollars development project. And that, by the way, that's what people hate de Blasio, too. It's like you can't fix the subway, but you want to support this, you know? And so now that tourism collapsed in New York.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just think that I think it's a precious life experience you have because you stayed in a Trump hotel. That's something to put on your bio. All right.
Do you know? I think I told you that the cab driver, I asked to be dropped at like Varick and Six or something like that, and he was like, "Do you actually just want to be drunk? Like, do you want to be dumped at Trump Soho?" And I was like, "I did not say that." And he was like, "Everybody who is being dropped off there says exactly the same thing. They want to be dropped off on a different street corner."
Oh, that's hilarious. That's so funny. Okay.
I was like, it was an
That's
accident.
rich.
It was a Priceline mystery bid. I promise I did not
That's
choose.
so funny. That's so funny. Okay, I have to wrap this up. So, Catherine, thank you so much for coming on the Daily Faded tonight. You're my first guest. You know, and we've had a massive crowd tonight. There's 3 people watching right now. So, but thank you so much. Where can people follow you? Twitter?
I am on Brobcat on Twitter, where I have been ranting regularly. And also, if you really like Agatha Christie, you can listen to my podcast all about Agatha. And
which is an awesome podcast. I listen to it, and it is fantastic. And even if you don't like Agatha Christie, it's very entertaining. So,
and also next week is it's Agatha's. It's our 4-year anniversary of the podcast, and it's Agatha's birthday on.
Pretty exciting.
And there's we were supposed to be in England because we were going to be one of the headliners at the 100-year anniversary of the Mysterious Brit Styles, and we're obviously not going to England.
Right.
But there's going to be an online element. So, your 3 watchers, Eric,
Yes.
they can go log on and watch all kinds of content about mystery novels.
Excellent. All right. All about Agatha. Everyone has to check that out. All right. Guys, remember to hit like, subscribe, and notify, but I think these 3 people have already done that. Oh, I smoked too much. I have dry mouth. Anyway, peace out, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is less on my camera. Catherine, thank you so much.
Bye.